mini deep dive series, Who's in Bloom, where we explore and introduce you to a prominent plant ally who's currently strutting their stuff wherever Angel or I happen to be. This is Anku, one of the co-hosts of the Science Witch podcast, and today we're going to be learning about Daffodil, also known as Narcissus, or even Jonquil if you want to be fancy, or if you're Tennessee Williams. Daffodil began blooming in my yard in mid to late January of this year, and is now blanketing large swaths of the land around my home. I don't think there's a bulb out there that the previous occupant of my home didn't really love, so we have daffodils. And I've often overlooked the daffodil. As an herbalist, I tend to gravitate toward the medicinal and the edible plants, and daffodil is not that. It is highly toxic, so it's best to appreciate it without too much contact. If you have daffodils around you, you'll probably start to see them as the first real green growth in the last quarter of winter. They tend to clump up and they begin to emerge as slender green foliage with a slight bluish sheen to them. They're flat and a bit wavy, almost resembling a wild onion in both stalk and bulb. Their flowers begin to emerge early in the season, sometimes poking up through snow for folk a bit north of me. The flowers start off bowing against the stem, and they perk up to about a 90-degree angle when in bloom. I haven't seen googly eyes on a daffodil flower, but in my mind's eye, it makes perfect sense. In each clump of seaweed-like leaves and shoots, there are several highly conspicuous flowers that are likely to emerge, one bloom per plant. The iconic daffodil is a bright yellow, but I also have some creamy whites, and I've seen cultivars with oranges and even some pink accents in the petals. The flower can range in size. I've seen small ones, maybe about half an inch across, and some larger ones which are about 2.5 inches across. The shape of the flower is beautiful and even a bit comical. With 6 petals and a classic Star of David shape, and a single petal emerging from the center and forming a funnel, known as a crown or trumpet. This mashup of the star and the trumpet looks to me like something a child might dream up in an arts and crafts class, just gluing together random bits of construction paper. I've read it described as like a classic bike horn, or to me it looks kind of like Birdo, the infrequent egg-spitting villain from Mario 2 that you might be familiar with if you're on the Gen X millennial cusp, like I am. The contrasting pointy bits and the curvy cup aren't the only parts of this flower that defy some of the boundaries that humans sometimes like to impose on the natural world. In the trumpet, we find both female and male reproductive parts, or gametes, with a rather long pistil surrounded by 6 pollen-covered stamens. Botanists refer to this kind of intersex flower as quote-unquote perfect, contrasted to quote-unquote imperfect flowers with only male or only female gametes. I was surprised by the smell of the flower. It's sweet, like a cross between a honeysuckle and a daylily. Now, both of those are really tasty, and thinking about those really made me want to see what daffodil tastes like, but remember, it is toxic, and so I refrained on this one. For me, the bright yellow of the flower and its shape strongly resemble the third chakra, the solar plexus. Yellow flowers are often associated in the doctrine of signatures with a heated energy of digestion and transmutation. And the solar plexus in the system is seen as the center of one's self-direction and will. Daffodil, or Narcissus, has a long history to being prominent aesthetically and mythologically. For the Greeks and Romans, daffodil was closely related to Persephone. As a quick primer, Persephone was the daughter of the grain goddess and nature goddess Demeter, and she was whisked away to the underworld to be the queen of the dead for the winter months until she was allowed to return back to the surface of the earth during springtime. So this goddess, which was central to the Eleusinian mysteries, was deeply connected with the turning of the cycle between the light half and the dark half of the year. Now, when she was grabbed by Hades, some have written that she was picking Narcissus. Others say that Narcissus are grown by the river Styx or are even food for the dead. For Sophocles, the Narcissus was the crown of the great goddesses. So the connection with Persephone makes sense, as it's among the first flowers to come back after winter. So as Persephone rises from Hades to join her mother in the land of the living, the daffodil is one sign of her return. For these ancients, the medicine of the daffodil was also in creating sleepiness and dulling the senses, which they associated with a death-like state. One compound isolated from the daffodil, galantamine, is actually used for lucid dreaming and to support in Alzheimer's. However, I don't know of any current herbalists who would recommend using this plant in that form. Galantamine is now synthetically produced and is likely safer than braving the other toxins found in the plant. The daffodil is also central to the story of the tragic beauty. Narcissus was known for his general hotness, matched by his overt lack of interest in those pursuing his heart. Nymphs or men, depending on the telling. After spurning a would-be lover, Narcissus is lured to a pool of water, where he sees his own reflection and is so taken with himself that he wastes away, staring into his own eyes, leaving behind the narcissus flower that bears his name. In other tellings, he either kills himself or remembers he has a twin sister and decides she's close enough. So, those are the Greeks. The Welsh also revere the daffodil, but they are decidedly more tame. Daffodil is the national flower of Wales, and these flowers are worn on the Welsh national holiday of St. David's Day on March 1st. There's some indication that the daffodil was chosen because the base looks like the leek, the national vegetable of Wales. And it's nicer to wear flowers than to pin a leek to your jumper, but it seems like it's a custom whose origins are not super clear at this point. In addition to St. David's Day on March 1st, as one of the first flowers of spring, daffodils are the perfect addition for your in-bulk altar. I've been offering fresh daffodils to Bridget for the last few weeks. The structure of the flower itself is a bit showy. It's not afraid to shine, and being one large flower speaks to me about putting yourself out there without shame or fear. Then there's the six-pointed star, often seen as the Star of David, unifying the heavenly and the earthly, also a sign of the heart chakra. The six-pointed star is said to represent unsticking energy and a balance of elements flowing together. To me, a lot about this plant represents the unification of aspects that, if misunderstood, might seem like opposites when it comes to gender or just the strange structure of the flower, or again, that it really smells like I want to take a bite out of it, but it won't let me. I feel like the daffodil luxuriates in this unification of seemingly inconsistent aspects of its form, its emergence. It's like a loud trumpet heralding the beginning of spring, which is also highly relevant in its magical associations of resilience and renewal. They've also written about daffodil as a fertility aid, not ingested, but even having daffodils around, perhaps a bouquet of daffodils on the bedside table. Daffodils represent not only fecundity and renewal, but also of romance and friendships, and helping us to hold to a sunny disposition even when things might seem a little frigid. In keeping with this theme, Paul Barrel's Master Book of Herbalism lists daffodil as being ruled by both Venus and Mars, representing the masculine and the feminine unified in one friendly face. Daffodil tends to grow in clumps, which may be a sign of its gift in blessing relationships. Morgan Daimler even highlights its unification of male and female in making this an especially powerful ally in LGBTQI magic. Other writers also point to the daffodil being used for protection and banishment of negative energies. In line with this, one growing guide recommends not putting daffodils with other flowers in the same vase, because daffodil poison can lead to them wilting more quickly. So, daffodil may serve both for strengthening connections and also cutting cords and removing negative energy and influences from your life that no longer serve you. And finally, the daffodil features in many works of art. Here, I'm going to read you one poem from William Wordsworth, the English Romantic poet from 1807. It's titled, "I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud," but it's also commonly referred to as Daffodils. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. They stretched in never-ending line along the margins of a bay. 10,000 I saw. I had a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee of how it could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought wealth the show to me had brought for oft, when on my couch I lie in vacant or pensive mood. They flash upon that one word in which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So, do you need some extra oomph to overcome the winter blues, or perhaps months of isolation? Then Daffodil might be a plant ally that can help give you the energy you need to call in the people and inspirations that will nourish you throughout the year. And also in leaving behind any accumulated gunk and dendritis that might be hanging on a bit too long. Thanks for listening to our second installment of Who's in Bloom, brought to you by the Science Witch Podcast with me, Anku. Our next episode will be on snowdrops with Angel, and then I'm considering dandelion or azalea for my next deep dive into the verdant world of Who's in Bloom. Thanks again for listening, and bye for now.